Greetings, fellow gamers. Last year was hailed by many, myself included, as the pinnacle for the Metroidvania genre, both due to the numerous titles released, as well as the insane levels of quality many of them boasted. With 2024 having been such an amazing gaming year, 2025 had truly large shoes to fill in order to rise to the occasion, but, against all odds, it actually managed to not only live up to the unreasonable standards set by its predecessor, but to actually surpass them by giving us some veritable masterpieces, including a long-awaited sequel that was very much worth the wait. Thus, with the year drawing to a close and its Metroidvania release cycle officially completed, please join me as we celebrate the absolute best titles in the genre, with each and every one of them being undeniable proof that said genre isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Before we begin, I do need to make two clarifications. First and foremost, as much as I strongly believe that all of these games constitute the true standouts of 2025, I do understand that some of you may have differing opinions on a number of the entries here, which is absolutely okay, since opinions will always be subjective. Second, while I have played the vast majority of games I will present, there were a few of them I didn't have the time to experience firsthand due to this year also having been the one where I became a father, which significantly reduced my free time. That being said, rest assured that those games were featured here after extensive research on my part, with their inclusion based on feedback from credible sources as well as viewing of gameplay footage. So, having said that, sit back and relax as we take a look at the 17 absolute best Metroidvanias of 2025, and make sure to stay until the end in order to see my ranking of the 13 that I played. It's no secret that Ender Lily's Quietus of the Nights is one of the most beloved and critically acclaimed Soulsvanias ever, so it only made sense for people to be incredibly excited when its sequel, titled Ender Magnolia Bloom in the Mist, was announced back in February of 2024, with the game becoming available on early access a month later before properly releasing in January of 2025, at which point it took the world by storm. Ender Magnolia is overwhelmingly considered to be an improvement over its predecessor, as denoted by the ridiculously positive Steam reception of 97% by more than 4,000 reviews, and has received high praise for its engaging exploration, satisfying combat, challenging bosses, haunting music, and user-friendly map overview, with its story being the only point that's considered weaker than the first game. Believe it or not, this is actually one of the 4 games on this list that I didn't get a chance to play since I chose to focus on some lesser-known Metroidvanias during that month, but its high quality is undeniable, with Ender Magnolia being widely hailed as one of the top 5 Metroidvanias of 2025. Super Roboy is, hands down, the most hidden of gems on this list. Featuring one of the most lovable characters in the genre, the game boasts incredibly fun exploration, very engaging ranged combat, some really cool boss fights, as well as a good degree of non-linearity after a point. That being said, the true standout aspect of Super Roboy is its skill acquisition system, which has you taking down fixed numbers of enemies in order to unlock an ungodly amount of special abilities that result in an increased level of efficiency and power to the point when you eventually feel like a godlike being. That does come with the downside that after a point the game can become quite easy, but nevertheless it never stops being fun. This is one of those games that truly makes you feel the immense amount of heart the developer poured into it, and it deserves all the attention it can get. Blade Chimera was one of the most anticipated titles of 2025, courtesy of its developer's penchant for creating quality Metroidvanias, and I must admit that Team Ladybug did a great job with this one as well. The visuals and art style are sublime, animations are smooth as butter, controls are beyond crisp, combat is an absolute joy to engage in, and the bosses are fun to fight, with all of these elements resulting in an impressively positive reception by the majority of its player base. That being said, I did have my gripes with it, which you can learn learn about by watching my review, but just to give you an idea, the game features a lot of long corridor rooms full of bad guys, which I consider to be somewhat bland from a map design perspective. Difficulty drops significantly after a point, making most of the fights a breeze. Side quests can get a bit tedious, and finally, Blade Chimera features a completely overpowered fast travel system that allows you to teleport to every single point of the map, literally, resulting in an ever greater lowering of difficulty since teleporting can save you during some tough combat segments. Regardless, Blade Chimera is definitely a high quality experience, and one I do recommend if you don't mind relatively easy Metroidvanias. Now, I do love a good Metroidvania with some form of cultural identity, so when I first heard about Somber Echoes and its ancient Greek-themed setting back in 2024, it had my undivided attention. Fast forward at the start of 2025, and I was having a blast playing the full release. Somber Echoes does an amazing job with its lore and ambience, seamlessly blending science fiction with Greek tragedy and architecture, all wrapped around an action-packed adventure. Wonderful visuals aside, combat and platforming are quite hefty and entertaining, though I will admit there was a bit of clunkiness involved at some points, but nothing too noticeable. What truly stood out to me was how sprawling the map was, which I know was a negative for some players since it could come off as overwhelming, and I get that, though my opinion went in the opposite direction since I loved getting lost across the space vessel Atromitos and couldn't wait to see what new horrors I would find next. Also, most of the bosses here were mighty impressive. Do give Somber Echoes a chance. It is very much deserving of one. I've probably revealed this quite a few times through references of my love for the 90s, but I actually grew up during that decade and love almost everything about it, including the arcades that used to dominate the era. Now, out of all the games I lost countless coins to, the one that takes the cake as having done the most damage to my finances is the Metal Slug series, so you can imagine why I was elated when I found out that a Metroidvania inspired by that IP was in the works. I'm talking of course about Guns of Fury, which takes the run and gun action of Metal Slug and infuses it with Metroidvania exploration, resulting in an explosive mix of constant skirmishes and the steady discovery of secrets. Granted, the map is quite primitive and most of the bosses, while visually impressive, ended up being relatively easy, but the excitement I felt while decimating legions of enemies with the help of a massive weapon arsenal took me back to the summer of 1996, and the first time I dropped a coin to the arcade, not knowing what lay in store for me. I don't know about you, but I sometimes just want to play a very short Metroidvania game that doesn't ask the world of me, and that's exactly what is offered by Tiny Dangerous Dungeons Remake. The game is quite short, sitting at about 2.5 hours for 100% completion, but is incredibly addictive in its simplicity, never presents you with a dull moment, and even throws in some challenging platforming on top of its basic yet fun combat, making it a solid all-rounder. This is not meant to be approached as a tough-as-nails complex Metroidvania, but rather a relaxing experience in between the more difficult entries in the genre. Also, bonus points for the retro visuals and wholesome music that harken back to the golden era of the 90s. See, I told you I keep making references like that. Anyway, if you're looking for a short and sweet Metroidvania, look no further. Zexion is the second out of the 4 games on this list that I didn't manage to play this year, and I'm truly bummed out about that. Aside from it being one of the few Metroid-likes to come out in recent memory, it also ended up being hailed as one of the best Metroidvania games, period, with lots of praise being directed to the wonderful interconnectedness of its map, the diverse possibilities offered by the numerous tools and weapons that become progressively available to you, as well as its challenging but fair level of difficulty, which manages to make you sweat in order to earn time your progress without ever feeling unfair. Its randomizer feature, which becomes available after beating the game for the first time, was positively received as well for adding to the game's replayability factor by allowing you to edit certain aspects of new playthroughs, such as your starting items, effectively leading to new routing options revealing themselves to you. This is on my short list of Metroidvanias to play, and if you're up for a challenge, it should be added to yours as well. I always found the lack of proper Igavanias surprising, especially given the fact that Symphony of the Night was one of the main reasons for the genre's popularity, so whenever a new one comes out, I make it a priority to try it out given my love for the aforementioned Castlevania game. I'll admit I was quite apprehensive about Guardian Servants of the Dark, since I'm not really into the suggestive side of things when it comes to anime, especially when it is simply done for titillation, but to my surprise, not only did the game end up having a very limited number of suggestive scenes, but it also ended up being a truly fun ride. It doesn't reinvent the wheel by any means, instead opting to provide tried and true gameplay mechanics, albeit with a small twist, especially when it comes to its bone-oriented leveling up system, which I found very engaging. The major issue the game had back when I played it was a complete lack of tutorials, which caused intense headaches by forcing me to button mash my controller in hopes of figuring out different movesets, but that issue has since been reportedly patched, so it's no longer a concern. Guardian Servants of the Dark offers exactly what you would expect from an Igavania, and does so incredibly well, so if you're on the search for such an experience, have at it. Me and Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree go way back to the beginning of this channel, since it was part of the first list I ever created, namely the one about my most anticipated Metroidvanias of all time. It wouldn't be until 2.5 years later that I would finally get to play it, but play it I did, and god was it amazing. I cannot properly put into words how much I vibed with this game. From its beautifully rendered setting, simple yet addictive combat and sublime music, all the way to its awesome boss fights and meaningful exploration, I just loved every second of my time with it. I completely understand why a good number of people didn't have an enjoyable experience here, due to Mandragora leaning much more toward its Souls side rather than its Vania one, as well as its grindy nature if you want to go for 100% completion, but I found both of those things appealing in a way, since the former falls right into my love for a good challenge, and the latter reminded me of my time with some of my favorite MMORPGs. So there you have it. This is hands down one of my favorite games of 2025, and you can watch my video review for a more detailed breakdown as to why that is the case. Just give it a shot, especially if you love a Souls-like challenge. It may end up being just what you were looking for. Metro Gravity is one of those odd cases of a game that is absolutely amazing, but at the same time, one that I am unable to play to completion. You see, Metro Gravity's main gimmick actually hides in its name, and that is gravity manipulation, with the game allowing you to pretty much walk upon every surface straight from the get-go, and soon after that you get an ability that has you guiding the world's gravitational pull at the direction of your choice, which effectively introduces the puzzle elements of the title that are quite ingenious. Problem is, I found said gimmick to be quite disorienting at times, with my mental exhaustion rising the more I played due to the constant circling of the camera until I eventually decided to opt out. That being said, Metro Gravity is a fantastic game for what it aims to be, and as such, has definitely found an audience, which is why I decided to include it here despite my own issue with it. On more positives, the music was fantastic, the visuals incredibly nostalgic, and the puzzles quite cerebral. In addition, movement felt fluid, and there was a constant sense of good vibes permeating the experience. Overall, I did find my gameplay rhythm here once I got the hang of things, but the amount of mental strain present from the gravity gimmick eventually got the better of me. I do urge you to give this a go though, since it truly is a masterfully crafted, unique experience, which you will definitely enjoy if vertigo doesn't defeat you. I always admire developers who attempt to introduce something new to a tried and true formula, especially when the element they're trying to incorporate is nostalgic to me, and that is exactly the case with Twilight Monk, a visually stunning Metroidvania that I had been looking forward to for some time now. Twilight Monk took a chance by introducing elements of JRPGs to its Metroidvania core and, thankfully, managed to do so with major success. Traversing the game's overworld and getting into battle arenas by running toward enemies was a truly wistful touch, though it was the title's overall gameplay quality that won my heart. Twilight Monk borrows heavily from Igavania's for its combat and character improvement, and features one of the most amazing art styles I've seen in the genre. Exploring every nook and cranny of the land of Spyria was a true wonder, as was meeting the diverse cast of colorful and quirky characters that populated it. I'll admit that I found it to be quite easy, even with its incorporation of an old-school save system, but that didn't stop it from becoming one of my favorite Metroidvanias of 2025. Please give this a shot. It is unbelievably underrated. Have you ever played a game that starts off okay-ish and kind of makes you wonder if that's all there is to see, only for it to pull the rug from under your feet a few hours in by presenting you with one of the best Metroidvania experiences ever made? Well, that's Chronicles of the Wolf for me, a title whose first 3 hours were serviceable though nothing to write home about, before turning everything on its head and becoming a fantastically addictive ride. The game does suffer from stiff animations, since it purposely tries to emulate gaming experiences from the 80s and the 90s, with all the good and bad that entails, but the second half more than makes up for that setback, and to be fair, you eventually get used to it. This is the closest you will get to the good old Castlevania games at the moment, at least until Konami decides to grace us with a new entry, so if that sounds like something you'd enjoy, give this game a go, and once you make it past the first few hours, prepare for Metroidvania greatness. DragonLoop is the third game from this list that I haven't played yet, which is unfortunate since this one seems like it follows the same pattern as Chronicles of the Wolf by presenting you with an underwhelming first few hours before turning into what many people consider to be an S-tier Metroidvania on account of its time looping aspect, which has you playing in 5-day intervals. Huge praise has also been directed to the uniqueness of the abilities you acquire during your playthrough, the wealth of secrets you can find, as well as its crisp visuals and top-notch performance. The game has been criticized for some minor nuisances, such as a poor translation of its texts, as well as missing sound effects and dialogue going by too fast at times. But almost everyone agrees that these issues are not enough to drag down an otherwise unique and worthwhile experience. I, for once, cannot wait to dive into it. Well, I mean, let's be honest, I don't think the presence of Hollow Knight Silksong in a top Metroidvania list video comes as a surprise to anyone. On that note, hey everyone, Silksong finally came out. To say that this was the most anticipated Metroidvania game of all time would be a gross understatement, and thankfully, it ended up having been worth the wait, much to Team Cherry's credit. Silksong has either been hailed or cursed at as one of the most difficult Metroidvania experiences, with its supporters lauding this gameplay choice, while its detractors hating it with a vengeance. As for me, the only thing I hated about it was the diagonal pogo, with almost every other aspect of the game appealing to me on a deep level, including the elevated challenge, which made me feel an immense sense of achievement after beating a boss that had been moping the floor with me for the past hour. I'll admit I didn't find it as compelling as the first Hollow Knight, but it came pretty darn close, which speaks volumes about Team Cherry's dedication to not only delivering another banger, but also doing their best to differentiate Silksong from the first game with significant success. You don't need me to urge you to give this game a shot, since most of you watching this have either already played it or probably hate it and don't want to bother with it, but for those who are still on the fence about it, take the leap and see what happens, especially if you enjoy a good challenge. When Lone Fungus came out back in 2023, it was an immediate hit with a large chunk of the Metroidvania community. That being said, there were certain complaints about the game, mostly in relation to some dementedly difficult platforming gauntlets as well as its sprawling exploration, which some people liked while others found it overwhelming and somewhat meaningless. Taking this information into account, Basti Games, the developer, set out to create a sequel that would try to top the previous experience while addressing those complaints, and thus Lone Fungus Melody of Spores was born. The game is actually quite different from its prequel, adopting a separate art style and going for more of an Igavania approach in its gameplay, going so far as to feature a whip as its weapon of choice. It also improved upon its predecessor on virtually every level, going for more compact and meaningful exploration as well as less punishing platforming, with said changes resulting in an overwhelmingly positive response by the player base. Lone Fungus Melody of Spores is the third game in this list that I haven't had first-hand experience with yet, but you can bet that I'll be tackling it early next year. Meaningful storytelling will forever be a massive draw in gaming for me, and that's just one of the reasons why I loved Constance. Tackling themes of depression, burnout, and self-doubt, Constance successfully manages to weave these topics into its world and gameplay in an engaging way, with everything complemented by some truly melancholy cutscenes that will probably hit home for a lot of people. All that aside, the game features some of the most fun acrobatic gauntlets I have ever tackled, as well as numerous memorable boss fights. Granted, the map lacks several quality of life elements, and a number of players didn't like the mentality behind the boss battles, which follow a structure of having to dodge a number of attacks before being able to hit back, but the map situation will be updated soon, and I personally enjoyed that boss mentality since it reminded me of classic platformers from the 90s. Constance truly resonated with me on a deep level, making it one of my favorites of 2025. Before we get to the last game, I do wish to make an honorable mention to the last Vanguard. I played this one during its early access period for about 5 hours, and even though it had a few issues, mainly related to the map's functionality, there was some solid potential there. The art style was fantastic, I loved its ranged combat, the gear system offered a good array of equipables to customize your playstyle, and there was a ridiculous amount of bosses to fight, which are actually the game's main focus and can be discovered in non-linear order, meaning that difficulty may vary depending on which big bad you stumble upon first, something that I found quite exhilarating. I'm placing this as an honorable mention because I didn't revisit it after it left early access, so I don't have a complete picture of the game, but I feel like I would be doing it a disservice if I didn't at least bring it to the attention of people that may not know about it, since I'm aware that the developers worked hard to address community feedback. Go show The Last Vanguard some love. It may just end up being your next favorite Metroidvania. From time to time, there comes a game that is so lovingly crafted, polished, imaginative, well-balanced, and entertaining that it makes you feel like a kid that's running around a fun playground. Well, as far as 2025 goes, that would be Pipistrello and the Cursed Yoyo, a Zelda-like Metroidvania game that stole my heart from the first few minutes of gameplay and never let go. The sheer number of secrets scattered across its setting would be enough to make anyone that's a fan of exploration exclaim in delight, and that's before mentioning the fun combat and diverse puzzles, both of which revolve around the titular Yoyo, a truly fun to utilize armament that supports a variety of uses. I honestly cannot sing this game's praises enough, so if you're into Metroidvanias or Zelda likes, make it a priority to play this one. It is beyond fantastic. So now that we've seen all 17 best Metroidvanias of 2025, it's time for my personal ranking of the 13 that I got to experience firsthand, so without further ado, here we go. Number 13 is Blade CHIMERA, which did not manage to meet my expectations due to its at times logistically uninspired areas and unbelievably low difficulty, even though I had a lot of fun playing it despite those things. Number 12 goes to Tiny Dangerous Dungeons Remake, which was an awesome microvania that functions more like a palate cleanser in between more complex gaming experiences. In number 11 we have Gull Guardian Servants of the Dark, which was incredibly fun and kept the Gavania flame burning, though it could have done a bit better with its world design, which was somewhat generic and blocky. Number 10 is claimed by Somber Echoes, which did a wonderful job with its world building and exploration, though combat could come off as a bit clunky at times. Number 9 goes to Super Roboy, which was dementedly fun on account of its ungodly amount of skills available, though the map design was quite rectangular and formulaic. Number 8 is Metro Gravity, which, aside from being very unique in terms of gameplay, is also a masterclass in imaginative world design, even if Vertigo did not allow me to explore all of it. Number 7 goes to Chronicles of the Wolf, whose somewhat underwhelming first few hours are succeeded by one of the best old-school Metroidvania experiences currently available. Number 6 is Guns of Fury, because you cannot go wrong with a Metal Slug Metroidvania, even though they did go slightly wrong with the map overview design. Number 5 goes to Constance, whose narrative touched my heart, in addition to its gameplay being a ton of fun. Number 4 is rightfully earned by Twilight Monk, whose simple yet addictive combat and fun exploration hooked me from the get-go, even though the overall difficulty was quite low. Number 3 goes to Hollow Knight Silksong, which was very much worth the wait and whose intense difficulty fully resonated with me. In number 2 we have Pipistrello and the Cursed Yoyo. Trust me, just play it. Finally, the coveted number 1 spot goes to Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree, a game whose art style, world building and gameplay design reminded me of some of the best games I played across the last 20 years. So here we are, dear friends. Another wonderful year for Metroidvanias has come to an end, a year that gave us some of the best additions to the genre. Now, will 2026 be able to top 2025? Well, there are some veritable bangers in the horizon, so there's hope for that yet. With that being said, I'm curious to hear about your own favorite titles of this year, so to that end, let me know your top 5 Metroidvania games of 2025 in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, sharing and hyping it, as well as subscribing to the channel. Until next time, Soulsborne Seeker out.